Hey Yoni, how's it going, man?
What's up, man? I haven't seen. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York City. Can't you tell with a nice, beautiful brick background we got
I
going on?
love it. There was another David in here that said he was in London or just outside of London.
Oh, we love that. It's such a global startup ecosystem we can imagine between New York, Silicon Valley, London. And I think you're going to be doing some traveling soon yourself, right?
Yeah, I'm headed to Israel tomorrow for 2 weeks to meet my engineering team, and then to Miami for Emerge Americas, which is a big conference at the end of the month. But it's funny, I just like kind of launching on that topic is exactly like how the work was done so differently 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and how today there's really no barrier.
Yeah, it's incredible. We're going to go into so many of these great topics for everyone who's just joining. Hello, we got both myself, David. We have Yoni. We're going to have a fun, dynamic discussion today. Appreciate the opportunity for you to connect with us. This is a new format that we're kicking off. We're going to tell you what we're up to, and we'd also love to hear your questions. So if you're joining us live, please be sure to drop questions into the chat. We'll be sure to go through them in this dynamic conversation. And it looks like we have a good group of almost 20 people on here. So awesome. We'll kick off. It's a little bit after 4, but let me set the ground for today's discussion, and then I'll introduce Yoni, and we'll dive deeper and start there. So AI trends in the future of work and the pre-seed landscape. As Yoni just shared at the start of our dialogue, the world has changed dramatically. AI is everywhere. Future of work is a mix between in person, hybrid, and virtual. We're a globally distributed ecosystem. And companies, whether you're consumers or enterprise, are working to integrate technology and business to become more than the parts, being the greater sum. And that also includes raising capital, being involved perhaps through venture capital or debt or other forms of financing. And so today's discussion is a conversation with my good close friend Yoni. Yoni runs a fantastic company called Margin AI. They're a portfolio company at Data Power Ventures. And we also collaborate for tech events in New York City and Silicon Valley and different co-investments. So there's a lot of great things we'll dive into today. But before that, just want to pass it over to Yoni. Love to hear more about yourself and what's top of mind for you as we're
Appreciate
here in
it.
Q1.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for having me. First off, on our I guess our maiden voyage here. So I am spent half my life in Israel, half my life in the States. Career head of business operations. I've taken part in a good deal of fundraising, including an IPO. I'm on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and what else? I like to consult and mentor a little bit on the side, invest a little bit on the side. I'm an LP in a couple of funds, an angel in a few, maybe 5 or 6, 7 companies, something like that. But the primary piece that I wanted to get across at the beginning of this call is that one thing David and I did not want out of this call was too much promotion. It's really not about that. I've enjoyed a lot of periods throughout my career where I got the opportunity to solve complex problems in untraditional ways from the business operations lens, and that's what I want to talk about when we get into future of work is exactly bottom line brass tacks what can help everybody that's watching. So that's it.
Awesome, awesome. And myself as the moderator or co-host for today, just for everyone's background, I'm a tech operator turned VC based in New York City. And as Yoni mentioned, we collaborate both across this company and different investments and events in the space. So really excited to have everyone here. Have a lot of common threads, but let me kick it off with an opening question. And again, as mentioned, anytime each and every one of you have questions, please feel free to drop it into the chat, the Riverside chat. We can see that. And I know many of you did pre-submit questions as well. So we do have some of those teed up throughout the session. But to kick us off, Yoni, you're, a founder, a seasoned operator, working in the AI and small business arena. You just shared about your arena, but could you let us know what inspired you to build solutions specifically for small, medium businesses?
Yeah, it was pain points around future of work. It was literally this. It was pain points that I experienced. I had started off. This is probably about 8 years ago that I was doing a lot of financial modeling, business intelligence, pulling together dashboards, graphs, and charts. And I was asking myself at first, why am I building these things from scratch every time? Why do we not have a Carta or a Global Shares or Equity B or whatever it might be for financial modeling, or more so for business planning, strategic planning, KPI tracking? Right, a lot of us have used, let's say, BI platforms as an example that are traditionally garbage in, garbage out. They're just pulling in our existing data and spitting it out in a different format. And so you're not, if it's garbage in, garbage out, the value of that data is not too great. And then on top of it, there are a lot of outside factors that affect that data and what you might do with your business that are generally not captured in a financial model. So I started off initially entirely planning on targeting early stage tech. We wanted to just tinker a little bit, see if this was valid first. So we built an MVP, very low cost overseas. And this was 2020-ish time, kind of in the middle of the pandemic. And what we found was very quickly, we found that number one was startups, while fantastic, and obviously we being one of them, are too small of a market for a product like this. Meaning you have to charge way too much money for the value that it brings in order to get yourself to the metrics of becoming a VC backable company. So the unit economics heading into early stage tech with a product like this didn't make sense. The second thing was, and mind you, by the way, small business is 33 million startups versus 33 million small businesses versus 83,000 early stage startups in the US. So naturally, the pool is much bigger. So that was a major reason to move into small business. Number one. Number two, a lot of others were trying to tackle this strictly financial modeling problem. And then lastly, which was probably the biggest one, was we got a lot of users come over to us during our beta testing, telling us that anybody else in the space, they're basically just building a budget in the cloud. And we were the only ones who had our eye towards the future, more around forecasting, prediction, AI, machine learning, and so on. And that's when we asked ourselves, okay, what if you were working on strategic planning for your business, big or small, and an analyst popped their head into the room and said, hey, by the way, there's a pandemic on the way, or hey, by the way, your street's about to be shut down due to construction for the next 3 months, or inflation's on the rise, or whatever it might be. And in particular, where we started off with in restaurants, if someone popped their head in and said, hey, by the way, eggs just went up 4 times the price, right? The average small business owner or restaurant owner doesn't know what to do in a situation like that. And they don't even get that information live to begin with. They spend 30 minutes a year basically on this kind of analysis in their business, and it doesn't get them very far. So we really recognize the need specifically within small business, and that's where it came from.
Now double clicking into this focus, both of us, we've worked with a lot of large customers, enterprise accounts, big business over the years, though the shift to AI could not be more clear, right? Since the chat GPT moment of a couple of years ago, it's as if everything anyone talks about is only AI. So with AI as top of mind, what unique challenges do you see that these SMBs face when adopting AI compared to enterprises?
So this is where we really get to the crux of what I knew we were going to get to today, which is the difference between chat GPT and embedded AI, right? So LLMs out there, which we're all familiar with now, are building developer tools, really. They don't expect your average consumer, small business owner, even enterprise management team to walk in and just continuously prompt an LLM. They're building something that allows us to build on top of and package it in a way that is digestible for the end user. So one of the things we've noticed recently is that businesses that do not have an AI first approach, particularly startups, don't get funding, interestingly. And that means literally refactoring your entire platform right this moment, because right now it's the hot topic, so that AI is at the forefront of everything that you're doing. I work with a handful of startups that do not have AI at the forefront. They're working hard to get it there, and they're struggling with fundraising because of that. So basically, the crux is this: AI has to be embedded in an intuitive and natural way. So the greatest example is, we all know how to search. We've been using Google and other search mechanisms for a long time. We know what that bar at the top means with a magnifying glass, right? Now, when you open WhatsApp, when you open Facebook, it's the same bar, but now it's powered by AI. So now you're getting much more precise and much more contextualized answers. You don't have to do anything more to get there. They embedded it perfectly, and it'll just keep getting better and better. I think the consensus is that everybody needs to be using AI without knowing that they're using AI. So for small business, to answer your question, David, for small business specifically, they want to know that they've got AI baked into products and doing things more than non-AI products would do. But they should not be worried about the intricacies of implementation, not even a little bit.
I think that's a really good approach. And, maybe to double click in that, I'll add some color here. We received a question in the chat from Massimo. Massimo asked, can we break down what an LLM is? And
Yeah,
I think this really ties into what Yoni just shared about implementation. It's this big, audacious goal of, do you build or buy? And what we've seen in this latest cycle of AI powered assistants, chats, applications is, on one end, you could be a company where hypothetically you purchase GPUs and you use some sort of AI powered architecture to create your own assistant based on any type of modality, text or audio or video or image or numbers and zeros. Um, and the alternative is you could buy something off the shelf. Perhaps it's a product like what Margins created to enable your company to be that much better, faster, cheaper by having these solutions for you. And what we see today, maybe from like the 50,000 level foot, it's the same approach of like an Anthropic where you have Claude. You could use their API, use the SDK, try to build something, or alternatively, pay for a solution like Perplexity with deep research and different offerings out there. So I think those are some different takeaways of like build versus buy or create an LLM or use a solution off the shelf. And I just shared a couple of those, but maybe to add further context, Yoni, those are some use cases I'm just sharing. And of course, you called out some of the strong use cases for Margin earlier, but what are some unexpected or overlooked applications of using these AI powered features for SMBs that you've discovered through your work building and scaling Margin?
I got really one great example, but I have to take a half a step back, and I have to discuss a little bit about what an LLM is and how it gets to to the output that you're seeing. So I'm gonna leverage my LLM right now. All right, and I just asked Google simply because they have Gemini already baked in. What is the scientific paper that LLMs are based on? All right, so many people don't know necessarily that a scientific paper was written in 2017. It is, well, I'll read off the answer. The foundational scientific paper that modern LLMs are based on is Attention is All You Need by Vaswani et al. In 2017. And it gives a little extra context around that. But bottom line is LLMs are reasoning engines. They are data free. Okay. I think a lot of people need to understand that. Consider an LLM to be a filter. And you put that filter over the data that you want to ingest through that filter, and then you query through that filter and ask it questions, and then it's pulling all that data in and it's figuring out how to answer that question in the best way possible. It reasons almost like a human being reasons. Now, we're all used to LLMs like ChatGPT, Anthropic, Perplexity, so on and so forth, that are leveraging publicly available data. But like David just mentioned, you can have your own LLM that is based solely on your data. And that's really where LLMs are headed. Obviously, we're all hearing about the agentic experience and all that. That's really the concept of having a small AI engine that does a specific task for you, your business, your end users, and you can have a bunch of them. So, for example, one might be one might manifest as a chatbot, allowing your employees to ask it, let's say, HR questions. That's an agent powered by an LLM trained on your data to answer questions specific to your business. You do also have the option, by the way, to include contextualized information from outside of your own data. So my use case is like this. Just recently, I had to draft a very formal legal response without an attorney's help. So I had an attorney literally email me in plain English, make sure you cover the following topics. And I literally copied what that attorney gave me, threw it into, I think it was Perplexity. I don't remember if it was Perplexity or ChatGPT, maybe ChatGPT actually. And I just said, literally, draft a formal legal response in the format of the specific courthouse that this needed to be sent into. I pasted in my attorney's advice without remember, no legalese, no citing anything, nothing. And it drafted it perfectly. I didn't have to alter it a little bit. I did have to copy and paste the text into the visually formatted because it won't give you the visual without a paid pro subscription, whatever it might be. So this is on the free version. I literally saved myself at least hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on legal work. Just like that. And it took me all of a minute and a half.
And, this is on one end exciting, right? We're moving into co-pilots, the world where humans like yourself and myself could exponentially increase our impact. What a couple years ago was thought of such that, oh, we might have an accelerant of 30% productivity. In this case, could maybe offer you 100, 200, 300% productivity. So truly, AI is becoming embedded in our business operations. Though with that said, Yoni, you called out that in some cases I could upload those legal files to the public cloud if I was using ChatGPT, Anthropic, or Perplexity, or I might have a small language model, something on the edge, something on my local device, and then apply my own data, like bring my own data or own my own data. So the question I have next is, what ethical considerations should SMB owners be aware of? Are there specific guardrails or best practices that you might recommend?
Great question. So if the AI is embedded as we want it to be embedded, they really shouldn't have to worry about anything. Meaning the vendors that are creating the AI and those that are integrating the AI into what the small business owners end up using should be an afterthought. And that's the only way we're going to get small businesses using this stuff more often. So remember, big increments of change are much harder to swallow than smaller, increments of change. And that's key with small business. We run into so many of them that just don't want to deal with any changes to their tech because it's not their bread and butter. So on one hand, on the other hand, I think we have a bigger societal red flag that we have to look at: small businesses and everybody alike. So, David, did you read the paper, the open letter written by Anthropic CEO maybe about 2 months ago by chance?
It was quite a strong statement that Dario made.
It was quite a strong statement. So for those of you who may not have read it or not synthesized it even, Anthropic CEO wrote an open letter about doomsday, basically, about how we are on the pathway. And here's the concept behind it. So I was born in 1983. I'm 41 years old right now, turning 42 later this year. I've seen a certain portion of the technological kind of advancements and evolution over the last 42 years, 41 and a half years, let's say. Obviously, people older than me have seen much more, but I was the last generation, including you, David, that experienced analog going into digital. So our lives were moving at the following pace. For those of you who might not know, one day we had a cassette recorder, right? Many years later, we had a DVD player, and many years later, we had MP3s. All right, now we're getting that type of innovation in days, weeks, maybe even hours for all I know. So if you look at it as a kind of a timeline, and that timeline kind of depicts the beginning of civilization, right? So the civilization's been around, not civilization, but human beings have been on this planet for 300,000 years, all right? Just a few 100,000 years, and this planet's been around for billions, 3 billion at least, according to carbon dating at least. If you look at the small period of time that we've been here as kind of an EKG, all right? And so it starts off, peaks and valleys of advancement, economy, growth, population, all those things. And you notice how the frequency of all these spikes gets much more frequent, much higher frequency as time goes on. That's really the speed to innovation, right? So you're innovating slower and then a little bit faster, a little bit faster, faster and faster. Basically, now we're at the point where we're innovating so fast that he believes that within 10 years that we might find ourselves dealing with something like Skynet. And the logic behind that is right now AI is built in a way that very different than software engineering, traditional software engineering, where you build something with purpose. AI engineering is built in reverse, where you're limiting its capabilities. You're telling it, don't do certain things, do everything but this. All right. So you're telling it, do everything ethical, don't do anything unethical. Do everything good, don't kill a human, right? Don't harm a human, whatever it might be. All we need to do literally is lift up those gates. And unfortunately, we're going to have black market AI just like we have black market weapons and drugs. So on an ethical level, we all have to be aware that, cell phones were very new and they were very nice at first, but now we get bombarded by spam texts all the time. It's going to be the same thing in every day, just powered by AI. And we have to be aware of that. So as an example, by the way, classic, because whether it was a bench or ramp, whoever had the drama recently, right? The accounting space, goes to your question before too, David, around the use cases. The accounting space has wanted AI forever and has touted AI forever. And they've all said, yeah, ditch your accountant, we'll do your books and your taxes and everything at the click of a button. It'll happen all automatically. And that wasn't really happening. And now it can. Now it really can. So we're seeing that AI embedded in a very natural way. But we got to make sure that we're on an ethical level. Like, don't go using an AI accountant just because it says AI in it. Vet it, make sure it's doing the job. You don't want to be stuck with a tax bill next year or whatever it might be. That's just a very simplistic example. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think, and we're gonna, for the audience's knowledge, we're gonna dive deeper into some of these topics as we move throughout our fireside chat. We'll get into agents in just a little bit, but let's hold off on that for about 10 minutes. I think ahead of that topic is, well, for many of our listeners here live or in replay, they might be looking at fundraising. They might be startup founders. They're looking to build their the big business, right? And Yoni, yourself, you are a startup founder. You have been navigating the pre-seed landscape as an AI focused founder. How have the expectations and the goalposts for pre-seed companies shifted in the current environment? Perhaps you could lean into your experience, talk about your fundraise, particularly for AI startups like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will start by saying I was fortunate enough to meet you, of all people. So you and I met through an investor of ours, Brian McCullough, Ride Home Fund, who's amazing, and also hosts Tech Meme Ride Home. Tune in when you can. He was fantastic. He introduced me to you, and this was kind of the beginning stages of understanding the pre-seed landscape. So I came from a world where we had raised a good deal of institutional capital, a couple $100 million. And when at the time you went out to raise money, you were dealing with, and we were, by the way, a biotech company. So we had the SEC to deal with and all sorts of laws. So we're talking about pitch decks of 50 slides, forward-looking statement disclaimers, all sorts of legalese. And so I came in starting the business, and everybody was like, no, not at this stage. Ditch all that, get down to 12 slides, 11 slides, ditch all the legalese, and tease your pipe dream. All right. And try to close funding that way. Okay. So I started that. I recognized that was my first mistake, but there were so many mistakes ahead of me that I had to discover and realize on my own. When I fixed that problem, I then fixed another problem, and then another problem, from storytelling to the economics to go-to market strategy and so on, until I'm still hitting a wall. What is going on here? We're not raising capital. And so what happened was, I think a lot of us have experienced the goalposts moving a lot over the last several years. In fact, everybody talks about 21, 22 as being a firestorm of funding, but a lot of us don't recall that. I take it back to approximately 8 years ago when CrowdStrike went public. CrowdStrike had an amazing IPO. Till this day, they're doing fantastic. And everybody and their mother decided it's time to IPO because CrowdStrike did so well. So that's when we saw Didi Chuxing in Asia. We saw Peloton and Instacart and so on. And unfortunately, after about a month and a half, all their IPOs tanked. And what that did was it caused retail investors to say, you know what, CrowdStrike was profitable. That's why they succeeded. The others were not so much. And I need to start investing in profitable businesses, or at least ones with an outlook towards profitability. And that trickled down. Those same investors are LPs and VC funds, and they're angels as well. And they changed their investment thesis. So they decided they need to go after profitable businesses. And the pandemic naturally gave birth to a lot of unprofitable businesses, not ones that wouldn't be profitable eventually, but a lot of new startups that otherwise would not have been born, all stuck in this pre-revenue stage, battling the same problem. So that was issue number one that got compounded by the OpenAI hype. OpenAI, now DeepSeek, obviously, is really grabbing a lot of the capital out there, unfortunately for us. And so it's kind of like the dream of being the next Facebook or Google is no longer the dream. The dream is now being the next OpenAI. And in order to get to be the next OpenAI, you need to start off with millions and millions of dollars amongst your friends and family in order to prove the concept before you can raise institutional capital. So that's how I see kind of how the dominoes have fallen over the last 8 or so years. It's just a theory, but it seems to be proven correct.
And I think there's a lot of interesting data points that you shared there, Yoni, that I'll double click into some because for listeners, as you mentioned, I'm someone who's actively involved in the VC space. I'd say over half of our investments are focused on early stage, these classic friend and family, pre-seed, seed stage, and I see all the time pitches from founders and discussions. And one of the big questions that I get asked at our in-person events in New York and Silicon Valley are, what metrics or what traction points are investors looking at? So for me as a pre-seed founder, a pre-seed AI company, I can raise. And how might that have been different 12 to 24 months ago? Well, my response is first, yes, 12 or 24 months ago, when ChatGPT was coming on and we were just reintegrating this next wave of AI, it very much was selling the vision, right? How are you building the next great TAM, and you're the right management team to build and grow a great business. But what I think has happened in the last 24 months is, for example, crypto and Web3 have mostly gone away from a startup perspective. They're still here, of course. As we know, Trump's administration is calling for a Bitcoin reserve and different coins like Ripple and Cardano to be part of a hedge. But specifically, founders have moved and gravitated into the AI space. And by way of that intensity of talent, it means not only is there incredible opportunity, but there's incredible competition. And to do that, that means not only do you have to show up at the table, bringing your vision, bringing your talents, bringing your resume, but in addition, you need to show your ability to execute. And execution means two things. It means operational rigor on building and launching and scaling a product that resonates with your design partners or your pilots or your early customers for that traction. And secondly, it needs to be that you have this strong hustle to sell, right? And to sell into your accounts, whether it's a customer that pays $10 a month or $10,000 a month, that doesn't matter. It's just your ability to execute and grow those named accounts. And so I often tell founders that at a pre-seed stage, it's really tough to say, like, you must hit this metric of a certain percentage, you must hit this much ARR or this many accounts. That's not true. Every firm has a different view. It's really about momentum and your continued identification of this early pre-market fit.
Couldn't agree more. Why? I have some thoughts. So, first off, I think a lot of us know that if you're well connected and a multiple time founder, a repeat founder, then there's especially with a successful exit behind you, then you can very realistically raise pre-revenue and pre-seed sometimes before product. I've seen that happen recently, right? Some of us are sour on people like Adam Newman raising $360 million from Sequoia without really proving much. I'm one of those. Yeah, that changes a lot about the dynamic. But as you notice, I was taking a couple notes. Number one is the world over the last 3 or 4 years, maybe more, has been moving, particularly the investment landscape, moving much more into utility for civilization. I think we realized that NFTs were not going to be that. I think we have now realized that Web3 isn't that now, it might be later. As maybe AR, VR gets bigger, Web3 can probably fit much more in there, but most of us don't necessarily like to go to a virtual conference and virtually navigate through rooms and stuff, and we can just hit a button and go into that breakout room. So utility has been very important. Number two, touching on your original question, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the fundamentals of fundraising were very different. You used to be able to raise on the back of a napkin. Then you needed a deck. And no one wanted you to spend money on designing that deck. It could look like garbage, but you needed a deck. Then you needed an MVP. That was probably 10 years ago. Then you need an MVP to be generating revenue. And now you need to be fully commercial in the market and picking up all the traction and the momentum that you just mentioned, David. So very, very different environment now, which means that the startup costs have grown. And where are we getting that money? I'm not really sure right now. Everybody's scraping around, but you did touch on one major thing. So the hustle and the sell. The hustle and the sell is not just in the sell of the product, but also in the sell to investors, right? So keep in mind that there's a lot more fish in the sea right now of startups. And so VCs and angels are getting way more decks than they ever did. They're having to spend much less time on those decks. Those decks need to show a lot of things. They have to tell a story in an impactful and emotionally evoking way. These are a lot of things that we didn't really have to think about years ago. One classic example, by the way, is years ago, you could get your stereotypical software engineer scientist who speaks very technically and maybe doesn't have the social skills that others do, pitching a very, very technical, innovation that is the new thing since sliced bread, and they would close funding in a heartbeat. Today, that person does not have the, let's call it the storytelling prowess and the public speaking capabilities to sell on that level. And I feel we're missing out tremendously on innovation because of that. I think we're making investments very heavily on too metric based and too short term metric based, meaning if a startup is doing $100,000 in ARR in its first year, that's a nice sign. But it's not a sign of a $1 billion company in 5 to 7 years. So I struggle with that a lot because I also invest primarily in pre-seed and finding those companies. I actually choose on purpose to go after companies that have not shown that traction because that means they have not been picked apart by thousands of other investors. So that's where I stand on that.
And, taking everything, all these great talking points that both yourself, Yoni, and I shared in the last few minutes, I think there's one more big point that isn't discussed enough with founders these days, which is when you're building in the AI space, you have to ruthlessly prioritize different elements to get that product market fit or that pre-market fit. And one of the big trade-offs is technical innovation. Like, are you coming out with the next chat GPT or AI powered feature, or distribution strategy? So I'm curious, have you seen the balance shift recently?
You need both 100%. All right, that's a major piece. So when I talk to my clients, my mentees, other founders, and we talk about exactly that, we've reached a point now where the table stakes of go-to market are exactly that table stakes. We need a lot more, meaning generally the inexperienced founder thinks that they can market their products solely on the backs of social media, advertising, digital acquisition, a little bit of content, maybe a TikTok type of strategy. And then when they get into the trenches, they realize that they have to start off with identifying their ICP, their ideal customer profile, and really getting to product market fit a lot faster than we used to. We don't have the luxury as much anymore. Keep in mind also our target audiences are being fed a lot more solutions out there. They're being sold a lot more than they did in the past. Just like investors, investors getting decks, our small businesses, our consumers, our enterprises, they're all receiving many, 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 many more inquiries from cold outreach marketing solutions. No investor wants to see any of that stuff on your deck. No one, because it's understood you're going to do it anyways. Everyone does. The key is to figure out, after you've identified your ICP, you've tested some channels, whether they're digital, in person, whatever they are. You also, by the way, you have to get your product to speak the language of your ICP. But ultimately, you have to show complete revolutionary innovation in the way that you're going into the market. And by the way, interestingly enough, right now, as everybody's talking a lot about how AI is almost forcing us into newer revenue models. And that's similar, where we're being forced right now into newer models of go-to-market. So I'll give you an example. Like I said, the typical founder might say, all right, or first-time founder might say, I'll just, I'll pump more money into my digital acquisition strategy. I'll get more eyeballs on my website. And then naturally that'll just lead to more revenue. Let me tell you, that's 100% not true. And I've experienced that myself. All right. We thought that at first while we were testing our channels. We weren't spending all too much, but we were spending, and we were getting tons of leads, tons of them. And the funny part is none of them were in our ICP, not one. All right. We're targeting, literally our keywords on Google are all restaurant-based, small business-based, profit margins, so on and so forth. And what we're getting is, I don't know, insurance companies, hospitals, stadiums. It was just so random. So don't dive headfirst into digital acquisition. You've got to test. But far beyond that, what we're doing is, so my business in particular, Margin, we focus on helping small businesses in a very holistic way. So we don't go in vertically into the small business. We don't do just point of sale. We don't do just inventory management. We're kind of the business intelligence solution over everything. And so basically it's a very different sell into, we're no longer picking up phones. We're no longer knocking on doors. I mean, we're a little bit of knocking on doors here and there, but we don't have the funds for that. Like we're going to send 1 million ambassadors onto the street. No, we have to be more creative. So we think in terms of the following. Where does everybody in our ICP hang out, whether digital or in person? Our ICP is restaurant groups, smaller restaurant groups. So there's a lot of restaurant groups out there, but we're not going to go door to door. We have to find out where they're all hanging out. So all of them hang out in, let's say, associations or conferences. A lot of them love to hang out on Reddit and in forums online to complain about their pain points, 100%. So now that we've kind of found where they're hanging out a little bit, now I go a step further. Where are they hanging out? Where are those associations hanging out? Where are all the Reddit groups, forums? Where do they come together? Maybe there's communities online of restaurateurs. And that's basically a step above. But let's think in terms of conferences. Where are all these food and beverage conferences hanging out? They all know each other. All the conference organizers, everybody who's like a staple at these, they all know each other and they're all hanging out in the same places. So how do we get there? Ultimately, what we landed on was twofold. With us, because we're going after restaurant groups, that also includes franchisees. Because franchisees can make their own decisions without a franchisor telling them exactly what to do in a particular space of their business. So for example, if we close a deal with the likes of a large fast food chain, let's say Pizza Hut, then now we have access to their thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of locations that are owned by individual franchisees. Now I don't have to go door to door anymore. Now I can work out with Pizza Hut a really good co-marketing strategy that we can leverage them as a channel to get to their franchisees, right? Our second strategy is, because we're so holistic around the small business, we are very, very relevant to economic development efforts within local government. What does that mean? A lot of us have probably come across various grants that you find online, and those grants are generally there oftentimes to spur local economies. So, a city might say, we'll give $2,500 to small businesses to buy a new laptop, things like that. There are a lot of organizations in every city that their goals are literally to spur the local economy, and they have to figure out how to bring in new employees, more businesses, and higher salaries, more money into the economy, into the local economy. So that's where you get tax breaks for moving from one area to another, from one city to another, and grants and so on. And that's why, by the way, you're eligible in certain cities versus other cities. And so what we did was we turned to economic development councils, particularly in Miami. We started off because I have some connections over there, and they loved it and they thought it was great. They have a budget already. So instead of pouring their budget, let's say, into what most of us agree on are small checkbox type of initiatives, like a laptop for a small business is not going to move the needle for that small business. They shift that budget over to a business like ours and our campaigns and strategies. And that way we are able to get to small businesses in a much more efficient way, more impactful way. We are also not bound by, we're a private company, not a public institution. So we're not bound by a lot of the laws and regulations that prevent them from being able to do what they want to do. So that's how we were able to basically get to the masses without knocking door to door. And I encourage everyone to think the same way.
It's so great that you're thinking about truly automation at scale with the right strategy, the right approach, thinking about your ICP, because there's growing excitement around AI agents. Yoni, earlier you commented, we can't have a sales force of 1 million people, right? But perhaps with these AI agents, of course, not to spam though, but we could have autonomous performance of
Please excuse
tasks.
David's dog. It's okay.
So the question is, how do you see these agents that are evolving to reshape business operations for SMBs?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I think ultimately we're going to land on a single agent being all of your salespeople, meaning it's an engine under the hood that no one ever sees that you instruct to do everything you want your sales team to do. And so, but I would say number one is I hate the word agentic. I don't know why we've leaned into this. It's a new way of saying I've built a script on top of an LLM to do something specific in your business. So maybe it's more digestible that way. But we've been doing it forever. So it's just an agent is a purpose-built bot. And I don't know that your average consumer in small business will understand that concept. I don't think that's embedded enough. I think it's a couple steps towards the right in the right direction, but not quite there. So it's very fresh right now. We've only seen this concept of agentic terminology for maybe about 8 months or so. We'll see where it evolves to.
Fantastic, fantastic. And well, I have with that, we're going to move on to a couple audience questions. So first, we have one here that came into the live Riverside. We'll add to the screen. This question comes in. It says, Yoni, what are your thoughts around Darren Acemoglu's prediction on AI? And for those who don't know, right, this is a prediction about the GDP in the US that's going to, double. But, actually, Acemoglu says he expects a 1.1 to 1.6% increase over the next 10 years. So that's going to be a little bit increase. So, Yoni, what's your take on it?
I haven't thought about this economically, and I'll tell you why. And this brings me back to what I said earlier. First off, I would say a 1.1 increase is still a very large increase. I don't know about over the course of that time. Maybe 10 years is a slow amount of time to get to 1.1 increase. I can't, without outing myself too much. I do agree with a lot of what Anthropic CEO said. And therefore, I'm thinking down two swim lanes in terms of what you asked, David, which is number one, on an economic level, but more micro in my own personal investments. I want to invest in things that are going to be heavily impacted by AI in a very, very downstream way. So what I'm starting to think about is, all right, we've got ChatGPT today. ChatGPT is being embedded into this software startup's company that brings this certain level of value to its end users. Those end users are going to do X, Y, and Z to bring them to that software. Basically finding the reverse breadcrumbs of what will come from AI today in the next 5 or so years. I'm not thinking too long term because if I subscribe to the notion that we're going to be dealing with Skynet in 10 years, then I don't know that I should be worried too much about the long-term outlook of my portfolio. On a GDP level, I have to admit, by the way, I don't know all of Darren's opinions on this. I think that we might have bigger problems to deal with than GDP. I think that AI is moving so quickly that soon enough AI will be building AI. All right, so it's going to get commoditized just like everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe that number is as small as it is because of DeepSeek and others commoditizing the space and really just leveling the playing field. Are we better than them in terms of country versus country? Maybe. Are we going to be better in a few years? I don't know. Of course, it's going to be a race of some kind, but I don't know if it's going to be a race that necessarily completely lopsides the entire GDP comparison. So I'm not sure. I'm definitely not the person to opine on such an economic topic, though.
Yeah, and with that said, I think there's one more audience question. This one was pre-submitted actually, which I want to comment on, and then we'll get your color as well. One of our audience members asked, "What do you see as the biggest misconception about AI adoption for small businesses?" What do you see as the biggest misconception about AI adoption for small businesses? And so first, I'll give my view here, and my view is that it's expensive. That's a misconception. It doesn't have to be, many of us think about building software years ago. Oh, you need $1 million to build a feature. You need a few $100,000 to kick a product off. It could be done at a fraction of that cost these days, depending on what you're building for, right? And how many locations and the whole integrations. Um, Here's a good example. Recently, you called out earlier, Yoni, about Google Gemini, right? And so Gemini launched their latest Flash 2.0 in Q1 2025. And as part of that, there's been some viral comments, viral as in like very, a lot of attention grabbing comments in Hacker News, which is this online forum of like Y Combinator founders, software developers, and builders. And some people said, wow, it's gotten so good that our old OCR software, and OCR software, you take a legal document that you scan on the phone, right? And then it tries to get the numbers and letters out of it, that they spent thousands of dollars a month on. For like $5, they did it with Gemini Flash 2.0. And anyway, so in short, I'm not saying it's going to cost you $5, but depending on what you're trying to do, right? It's the new enablement. It's the next wave of technology and compute. Much as we saw the rise of mobile and cloud, AI is that next wave, and it's the perfect time to integrate it into your business.
Yeah, I'll say that number one, definitely misconception that it's expensive. Yes, it can get expensive. It's more expensive for companies like ours, not as much for the small business itself. More expensive for us because we're doing it in massive volumes. Granted, we'll get volume discounts, but that doesn't mean it's cheap. Whereas, like you said, David, the use case is very determining in answering that question. But the second one, naturally, is the implementation, the lift of getting it implemented within your small business. AI is making things very, very easy these days. And so I think that ultimately, and by the way, those are the two questions that most ask, right? Is the lift worth the value or vice versa? And is the cost worth the value or vice versa? And so, and that AI, no AI, those two questions are going to be around forever. And so I think that around the lift is, yeah, if I'm a small business owner, I could go to ChatGPT in 2 seconds and get value in it. Or I could use WhatsApp for Business and leverage the wonderful search built, the meta search built into it. Amazing. Now I'm using AI. I'm not going to hire a dev shop, an engineering shop, to build me a unique custom AI experience within my small business if I don't plan on going national. And so that's where the embedding comes in. So I think right now it's a misconception, more so for us because we deal with this every day. We know how easy it could be. For them, it's more of the perception of change, right? They're scared of it, just like anybody would. So I don't think it's a question of, it's something new. Just like the cell phone came out, replaced the landline, right? Like credit cards came out. All these things they caused changes in behavior, and it did not happen over time. In fact, if you check out studies, it takes 20 years, 20 years to change the behavior of a civilization. A civilization being a small country, whatever it might be, a market. 20 years to change behavior, which means you're getting to a point where the majority is their behavior. The behavior of the majority has changed, right? That takes a long time. We're just at the beginning of this. I mean, for the last 20 years, we were asking, what is the internet? Now we're asking, what is AI?
And such good gold nuggets that Yoni, you've shared and I've teased out in today's conversation on this fireside chat of AI future work trends. And there's so many more great questions. I would be remiss on time. Isaac and Zev and others, we love everything you're sharing here. And some of these will be deeper discussions. And may this be the first of our series. But in the sake of time, right, I'd like to wrap our formal discussion with more of a forward-looking question for both Yoni yourself and myself. And I'll start with you. Yoni, what advice would you offer or give to founders who are just getting started today? They're starting to build, they want to, implement AI, they're considering the future of work. What advice would you give to the founders getting started today?
Yeah, it is so easy for me because I have gone through a lot of trials and tribulations that have taught me a lot over recent years, and it's going to sound so unintuitive. So I am not a technical founder. I'm more on the business side. I'm a business ops person. So I had an idea, but I didn't know the first thing about how. I should say I was a software engineer years ago, but I left that world, and so I'm definitely not on top of the latest and greatest. And what I recognized was that very unintuitively, a lot of people want to hire an engineer first, start working on something. And that was really the mindset of years ago. And I don't think it works anymore. The mindset of years ago, when we could raise on the back of an MVP that wasn't generating any revenue and would probably have to be rebuilt and refactored anyway, it was perfectly okay to hire someone offshore or find an individual contributor that would build an MVP. Today, that's not the case anymore. So my lesson learned, easily the biggest lesson learned, was I should have started with a chief product officer, a product manager by trade. If anybody doesn't know, David's a product manager, by the way, by trade. Are you not too proud of that, David?
No, there's a lot of battle scars for sure.
Got it. So I'll tell you, and I can go on for this for days. So feel free to reach out to David or me directly if we're connected, and I'm happy to expand on this. But basically, I started off with with friends more so, helping wherever they could, and then an engineering shop offshore, and they built exactly what we needed them to build when we thought that's what we needed. Fast forward a while later, we realized that the way that I was the designer, I was the product designer, product manager as the founder. I didn't have funding to, let's say, go out and hire someone. It was too early, and I had no business doing this. I wish I had tapped an actual experienced product manager who would know how to engage with the market and validate it beforehand. Understand the language that the market is speaking. Here's a classic example. I built a product. I built the MVP, ingesting all of your P&L by just asking questions, and it would take like a half hour. It was way too long. I could get through it in 5 minutes because I understood it, but the average person couldn't. And it wasn't until we brought on a very, very highly qualified chief product officer in Sarah Baradaran, who is now our co-founder as well, who's amazing. And she has taught us so much. We have gone through tremendous amounts of user research. We've tweaked the product to fit that research. And we saw along the way when it started actually resonating. So chief product officer, a product manager first. I used to say financial model first, pitch deck, engineer, register your entity. That's the business operations person. On a product level, easily product squashes all of that.
Yeah, and I would 100% in the sake of time as well, I would double click into what Yoni mentioned is, hearing and seeing so many pitches and incredible founders who are passionate about what they're building, though they have not researched deeply the problem and gone deep with the customer and truly experiencing that pain point. We're not solving for a vitamin, we're getting that painkiller. We're truly solving for something that needs to change the entire workflow. As a founder, do the research, do the hard work, show that you're in it and committed to solving a big problem space. And by doing that, I think that will bring you ahead of most founders, that will align with things like that Yoni and I highlighted today from implementation strategy and channel distributions. So you could be building as part of the AI and future work industry. With that said, I just want to thank each and every one of you who joined us live on this fireside chat or on recording. It's been my pleasure. I'm David Yakobovitch at Data Power Ventures and Tech Power Network to bring on Yoni Rubin of Margin, one of my collaborators in the ecosystem. And I hope that you've all, taken away some great learnings from today. It'll be just the first of our series discussing what's important to you. Yoni?
David, thank you so much for having me. Quickly, Zev, I agree entirely. We considered the prospect of actually moving to San Francisco just to close funding quicker. It was pretty wild. We have friends over there that are closing much bigger rounds, blindfolded with no revenue. It's sometimes wild. I've got David in terms of utility. David Yakobovitch just answered that question in terms of utility being utility to civilization, helping civilization, things that actually contribute to society rather than just bells and whistles. And I will gladly put NFTs in the bucket of bells and whistles. And then Isaac, I appreciate it. Lots of great insights. And I don't think I can get through all, but guys, thank you so much for joining. Data Power is doing some amazing things in the space. I encourage everybody to take a look at what David is working on. He's been running a super successful syndication for a while that is now turning into a live fund after a great success. So be in touch with David, and good luck to Data Power.
Okay, so one moment. Let's see. I press stop. Now, one moment, as this is my first time on this, Yoni. So let's check our cloud
I think the
recordings.
call is still